Hello, 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 and welcome. I'm Mehran Khalili. We are DiEM25, a radical political movement for Europe. And this is another live discussion with our coordinating team featuring subversive ideas you won't hear anywhere else. Tonight we are, excuse me, just had to shut something off, start again. Tonight, we'll be looking once again at what can happen over here in Europe when you speak out against Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza, which to date has killed over 30,000 people, most of them women and children. And specifically, we'll be examining the disturbing events of last Friday in Berlin at the Palestine Congress. Now, this was a vital three-day conference organized by multiple groups, including us, DiEM25, as well as Jewish Voice for Peace. Its goal was to unite activists around a ceasefire for Gaza and to examine Germany's complicity in Israel's murderous campaign. But shortly after the conference started, German police stormed the building. They blocked access to anyone trying to get in. They shut off the power, disabled the live stream, and ordered everyone to leave. They detained dozens of activists who were attending, including many Jewish ones. They deported one of the speakers, a surgeon who had treated people in Gaza. And then we learned that our own Yanis Varoufakis, who was also due to speak at the event, had been banned too, not only from making political speeches in Germany, but also from doing so over Zoom. Now, Berlin's mayor said of the crackdown that we do not tolerate anti-Semitism, hatred, and incitement against Jews, as images of his police enforcers arresting Jews for protesting genocide filled screens around the world. The German Interior Minister suggested that the conference was spreading Islamist propaganda and hatred against Jews. She praised the Berlin police and said, "We need immediate, tough action when such crimes are committed," when the actual crime of the conference was just to talk about the mass slaughter of women and children that continues to this day, with German bombs and German support. The lengths to which Germany will go to silence criticism of Israel, to atone for orchestrating a genocide in the past, and to obscure its role in a genocide in the present are truly astounding and revealing about our political landscape today. As activists advocating for Palestine, we should examine it and learn from it. So tonight, we'll be putting this act of repression under the microscope. Yanis Varoufakis is here, as well as colleagues who attended the Palestine Congress, as well as a special guest, Georg Ismael, who helped to organize the event. They'll be weighing in on what really happened, what was the reaction, what lessons could we draw, and what could it all mean for free speech and for Palestine. And, of course, you out there. If you've got thoughts, comments, rants, anything you want to say, anything you want to add, things to get off your chest, watching this live on YouTube, just put your comments and questions in the YouTube chat and we'll put them to our panel. Let's kick it off with Yanis.
Thank you, man. I can't wait to hear from Georg as an organizer of the Palestine Congress, and also from Karin De Rigo, the person in charge of our attempt to get elected in the European Parliament elections in Germany. Karin is leading our list of candidates for the European Parliament. I wasn't there. I was meant to connect through Zoom, which I now find out even that I can't do. Or at least there is a threat that if I do it, I will be crossing the legal maze, which presents itself as a rules-based German system. Allow me to offer a broader perspective. I feel very honored to have been banned by this German government. But I don't have the right to think personally, because there are people who are, as we speak, terrified of what might happen to them if they are associated with the struggle that they live in for political rights in Palestine, in Germany for that matter, because I have a certain presence in the media, which to some extent shields me. If something happens to me, it will become news. But many of our volunteers, many of our supporters, many of the people out there who are carrying the weight of the struggle on their shoulders don't feel as secure as I do. And we have to seriously worry about them and work towards their safety and psychological uplifting. So, having made that preface, allow me to take a broader view of what has happened last week. And I'm going to start the account of last week, of this momentous week, with what happened at the beginning of last week, on Monday. Because on Monday, I was in Milano, in Italy. Nothing to do with what we're discussing today, but I think at the same time, everything to do with what we're discussing today. In Milano, first I addressed a Mera25 Italian meeting, but then the next morning, on Tuesday, I gave a speech to a gathering of hundreds of European financiers, financial analysts, in which, without knowing, of course, what was going to follow during the rest of the week, especially last Friday and Saturday, talking to these financiers, I outlined my analysis of what's going on in the German economy. In particular, I outlined dire prognostications about the long-term damage inflicted upon Germany's social economy by decades of austerity, combined with money printing, that hugely impressive largesse on behalf of financiers. You know, the whole Merkel-Schäuble period, extending to the Olaf Scholz era. To my surprise, those hard-nosed financiers, men in their suits and some women, not men, hundreds of them in Milano, they applauded my analysis. And many of them approached me afterwards. This was all done behind closed doors. They approached me to say that I was right. I have to tell you that when these financiers hear me come up with prognosis of substantial economic distress, especially in Germany, and I say, you know, I put forward these ideas, and then they come to me and they say that I'm right. I leave very vexed, very worried. Deep down, I hope that I'm wrong. Okay, and then there was a speech that I never got to deliver in Berlin, which left me not merely troubled, but literally speechless. Let's go much further back. You all know, but maybe many of our viewers won't know, that it all began on the 8th of October, the day after Hamas attacked Israel, when I was in Berlin visiting our Mera25 Deutschland comrades and participating in events. You'll remember that event, some of you. And on that day, I found out about what had happened in Gaza during a television interview. And to the inevitable question, do I condemn Hamas? I replied that I condemn every single atrocity, whomever has committed it. But I do not condemn armed resistance to an apartheid system designed as part of a slow-burning ethnic cleansing problem. And I made the point, which really annoyed a lot of people, that as a European, I feel the need to refrain from condemning either the Israelis or the Palestinians when it is us Europeans who have caused this never-ending cycle of tragedies. After practicing rabid anti-Semitism for centuries, leading up to the uniquely, to pogroms and more pogroms and more pogroms, leading up to the Holocaust. We Europeans have been complicit for decades with a slow genocide of initially the Israelis and now the Palestinians, as if two wrongs or two genocides make one right. Days later, it all began with the rescinding of an invitation I had from the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, who had invited me to collect the prize and deliver the prestigious Otto Wagner lecture. Then the plot thickened. You'll recall last February, mid-February, when I was in Berlin, to help Raúl Martínez, our comrade, British filmmaker, artist, and philosopher, who had made that six-part documentary centering around me called In the Eye of the Storm. And remember, we were due to launch that documentary in the Babylon Theater in Berlin. And then we found out that Berlin's police and municipality were leaning heavily on the proprietor of Babylon to cancel the event. When asked for the reasons why they were so insistent on banning us mid-February, the authorities gave to the proprietor a single word reply: Varoufakis. Interestingly, Babylon's Jewish proprietor told the police where to get off and that he would not budge. And it was, if you recall, it was really touching how he stayed in situ during the event, walking up and down the packed auditorium, an auditorium packed and bursting at the rims with Jewish, Palestinian, and German supporters. I'm saying this because it's important to put the whole thing of what happened last weekend in context. Now, a month ago, I got a very curious email from my German publisher, Kunstmann. It warned me ominously that if I participate in the Palestine Congress, which we, as Mera 25 Deutschland, together with Jewish Voice for Peace and many other organizations, we were putting together. And I was told by my publisher that if I participate, this will overshadow my next book's reception in Germany, and that it will be highly problematic. It's very interesting that my publisher, who are not that au fait with what's going on in the political sphere, were informed that there will be problems with my book if I dare participate in this Congress, long time before the Congress. Of course, as a result of this rather rude email, I severed my links with that publisher, even though we've published 6 books of mine together for the last 12 years or so. Essentially, what has been happening is, in Germany, as the body count in Gaza is mounting, and hearings at the International Court of Justice are challenging Germany's official policy of state raison, of the logic of the state, that Israel's security is Germany's security, or raison d'etre. It's clear that the authorities are increasingly lashing out. Remember Iris Heffetz, our friend and colleague in Berlin, having been arrested for anti-Semitism, an Israeli Jewish woman being arrested by a white Aryan policeman in Berlin for anti-Semitism because she dared have a placard as an Israeli and as a Jew, stop the genocide in Gaza, which of course prompted us, remember back then, to say if she had said, as an Israeli and a Jew, I support the genocide in Gaza, that would probably be okay, right? Because in Germany, you can only talk about genocide if you are supporting. Now, going to last week and to the beginning of it, there was a joint statement, remember, by Germany's almost entire political class, CDU, CSU, SPD, the Greens, and sadly 2 leaders of Die Linke in Berlin, that portrayed us as terror trivializers, as anti-Semites. They created the political pretext. They paved the ground politically for the police action that followed on Friday. Now, I don't need to remind you, I think Maren explained it very well, and I think Georg will tell us more about what went down. When our Congress eventually got underway, even though hundreds and hundreds of police were there to prevent it, and the police burst into the building, into the venue, and interrupted the proceedings, I recorded a speech that I was unable to deliver through the live streaming, which was interrupted, and posted it on my personal blog. Clearly, the authorities were not very pleased. So on Saturday, we were informed during the demonstration that we staged in Berlin against that unprecedented police intervention, not intervention, incursion, invasion of the venue, that a ban on any political activity, my political activity, was slapped, of the kind that has been used only previously for ISIS operatives and the like. When our lawyers reminded the authorities that besides being an EU citizen, I was also a candidate in Germany, as a German candidate for the European Parliament 5 years ago, and collected quite a few votes, remember? There was an embarrassed silence, and then this prohibition was replaced by another softer prohibition. In any case, I'm not going to go into the details now because I think we should wait for a couple of days. I believe we have caught the authorities in Germany lying through their teeth, even in written form. And we shall be back with this because they broke their own rules. And if Germans, even conservative Germans, dislike one thing, it is their own government breaking their own rules. So I will conclude with the essence of it all. It is now clear, at least to me, that Germany's state rationale, state raison, is not about protecting Jews. It is about protecting the right of Israel to commit any war crime of its choice. And it is also a sad reflection, going back to what I said right at the beginning about my speech in Milano to financiers. I think it's also a sad reflection on a country whose waning economic dominance, or to be more precise, the waning economic dominance of its oligarchy, is fanning the flames of increasing and increasingly farcical authoritarianism. Georg, Karin, I'm looking forward to hearing your side of the story.
Thanks, Yanis. Yes, Georg, you have the floor. Georg is a member of the Student Coalition Berlin and Arbeiter Innenmacht, and one of the co-organizers of the event that was so brutally shut down on Friday. Georg, please take it away and tell us your experience of what happened.
Well, first of all, great thanks to the comrades of DM and Mera 25 for offering their support in organizing this crucial Congress, the Palestine Congress. Without you, we would not have been able to accuse the German state as we did, especially after the authorities pushed the Berliner Sparkasse to close down the bank account of the Jüdische Stimme, the Jewish voice here in Germany. And it was very important that you lended your organizational capacities as well to make this all happen. So thank you very much. I'd like to say a few broader words in the beginning as well, because I think it's important that, especially in Germany, we understand the situation that we are in generally, because I think for more than a decade now, a world situation of wars, crisis, very often counter-revolution has been building up, a very, unstable world situation. And for a long time, Germany, as the economic powerhouse of Europe, thought to itself that imperialism was over. And this is a story that we've been told in schools as well. I myself have been told. And I think this illusion is now shattering in the world that we live in. And I think, therefore, that what's happening in Gaza is somewhat of a turning point for this whole narrative for Germany itself. And therefore, it's very important that we are cautious, that we look very closely what's happening. Because in some sense, I think Germans, unwavering support for this horrible genocide in Gaza is also both an attempt to absolve Germany by its own history and therefore break through all the, foreign policy restraints that Germany had after the Second World War in the world situation that we are currently facing. And this is accompanied with a turn towards more authoritarian rule, Bonapartist policies inside Germany as well. So something that, in fact, Germany, through its economy, has been exporting, to the whole world, and in fact to a lot of European countries. I might personally remember very well what Germany did, for example, to Greece, and I'm sure Yanis does as well. Germany is now doing on other levels as well again, and the military level is part of this. So I think this is important for us to understand. And therefore, what's happening in Gaza is also about something that's happening in Germany and to German society. And I think it's very important that we as leftists and as the labor movement also remember something very important, that a German socialist once then said that the main enemy is at home. And I think we tried to refresh that knowledge as well through the Palestine Congress, when we said we accuse. And of course, we accuse Israel for carrying out this genocide, but we accuse Germany of supporting it and abetting it on all levels that you can imagine. And even though the Congress could not really take place, I think we brought the canvas and we brought, the paint, and the German government and the German authorities, they took it into their hands and they painted in the front of the eyes of the whole world to see where we stand right now. And I think this was very important because this was nothing new. Germany had been doing this, the German authorities had been doing this for 6 months already. They've been brutalizing, Palestinians, their allies, throughout. We have seen everything. We've seen here in Berlin, youth being beaten into coma, and after waking up, being too afraid to speak out about it because they feared that this would somehow impact their own lives. We've seen policemen stomping out candles of people who gathered to mourn their loved ones, their families. So this did not come as a surprise, what we saw on Friday. But I'm glad that the whole world watched it. And I think it's important that we go on from here on, though. Accusations as they stand have never changed the world. People realizing something and then organizing, together, that has changed the world. And I think it's important that we also see the ways how the government restrained us from doing that by banning the Congress, by banning all those opportunities, and that we come true on them in the coming weeks and months. And I think despite everything, we did lay some grounds for this, and this is also a call to comrades in other European countries and beyond Europe. Get in touch with us. We will try to get in touch with you to organize together in order to stop the atrocities happening in Gaza, and also to stop the German government from supplying weapons to Israel, from giving any diplomatic, economic, financial, political support whatsoever. And I would also like to say a few words in response to Kai Wegner and to Nancy Faeser. Kai Wegner said that he was very happy, that the Palestine Congress got crushed because one had to do everything against those hating Israel. I reply very simply, if I had been a socialist in the 80s and before that, I would have hated South Africa. And I would have hated my government and my state for supporting it. And I do the same with the Israeli state. This is not about religion. This is not about ethnicity. It's about a state that is pushing these things to the fore. And I'm completely against that. And every sane person should be. Every person standing up for humanity and democracy should be. And to Nancy Faeser, who said that we don't allow any Islamist propaganda and no hate against Jews. I think this also shows, the danger of the moment that we are in right now and what's happened after 20 years of the so-called war on terror, that fake news can be spread, with such impunity by high officials of a government that claims that it is democratic. And it also shows, if we look at how the Palestine Congress could be banned, yes, a lot of illegal things happened, but it also shows how the so-called imperialist democracies have all kinds of means and measures in place, have implemented all kinds of laws over the last few decades that allow for all these things to happen. And I think in so far what's happening, what we see right now is a moment where all the colonialism, all the imperialism that Germany has been exporting to the world, it's coming now back to its own metropolis. And we have it in our hands of what the response is. Are we going to forge new alliances with the comrades who've made their way to Europe, to Germany? Will we take in their revolutionary experiences? Will we build a new labor movement that can effectively fight back in order to stand at the side of our comrades, be they in Palestine, or be they in Sudan, or be they in Congo, or be they wherever? And can we also change and transform the trade unions and the labor movements here in order to achieve these goals? Or will we fall back into an age of right-wing authoritarianism and possibly fascism as well? Because if we don't push back against the so-called progressive government in doing so, that is going to be the alternative waiting around the corner. And I think a lot of people have pointed this out. What the government is currently doing, they're basically laying the blueprint for any, far-right government in Germany, and it's therefore it's very important, I think, that we build these international solidarities and fight back. And I'm very glad that we might have the chance to do this together.
Thank you very much for that, Georg. A couple of comments from the chat. Non Latifundia says, most of us thought fascism was over in Germany. What the fuck happened? Jesco says, big thanks to the organizers for involuntarily exposing German authoritarianism. Max Ford notes that the European Union is concerned about CO2 emissions from cows, but remains silent about the bombs and missiles. And Gerd Schneppel says, no, sorry, Tarek says, please don't say Germany, he asks us. It's the government at fault and an unknown percentage of the people. Yes, I agree. I hope you will forgive us that shorthand that we're using here today. Karin De Rigo, our lead candidate for our German bid for the upcoming European elections, who was also speaking at the conference, or would have spoken, or would have spoken a little bit more had it not been shut down. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Maran. So this week, I'm trying to kind of zoom out of all what happened in order to analyze it with the calm, but still I get so upset. And because probably I told myself I am just way too naive. I had never expected that in 2024, in Germany, in Europe, something like this would happen in front of my eyes. First of all, I also want to thank all the other organizations that organize with such a strength and such a dedication this work for months. Because as I try to imagine it, there is a climax on all this. The conference started organizing basically in December, January, and we didn't expect to create such a big story, honestly. We would have liked, obviously, but it was not planned. The German government did us a great gift, and we thank them for that. But still, what I'm still super upset about is that it was really a provocation from the first moment, not only from the freezing the bank account of the Jüdische Stimme, because the donations and the tickets were collected there. Not only for that, not only because they tried to cancel our fundraising event, not all because they spread so much hate propaganda through the media, which were just repeating what also politicians were saying. So we were kind of attacked from in every front. And also the police trying to find out the location, trying to stop every possible step that we could take. So in this environment, we managed to really achieve actually what we wanted. Because a small group of people staying for peace, for solidarity, asking to stop a genocide, could actually, in the end, hold accountable the German government. Because there was also a press conference, and the Minister of the Interior was so embarrassing. I don't know what I would have done in their place. But still, what we lived on Friday was just a breach of every democratic right there is in Europe. Not only, first of all, the police broke the electricity to stop a live stream. Well, not even a live stream, broke the electricity to stop a video that was pre-registered. Because just to act in the form of a preventive censorship. They always, they also try to present the press that we didn't accredited, letting them out from a back door in order to reduce even more the capacity of the room. Because from 800 people that were supposed to come in, we were suddenly 250. So all this restriction from any part have just confirmed that Germany has lost completely its narrative. They are scared because of what is happening and what can happen in the future. Because even though the ICJ doesn't have direct power, but still, all the rest of the world has seen what they are capable of. And they will be stopped sooner or later. what I would like to remind again, this was a positive moment for us, but we cannot forget that the important thing is that the ceasefire gets approved immediately, and Germany has to stop to send weapons. This is what counts now, and all the responsibles must be held responsible. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could tell 10,000 details of that days, but the important thing is the end is that Germany has its show, its fastest face. And we have to keep fighting in order to change the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. Amir Kiyaei, who was also at the event. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mehran. Georg mentioned something in his intervention. He said, when people realize and then organize, that's when change can happen, real change. And it became very apparent to us that the authorities are trying to prevent people realizing, by doing what they did. And something that hasn't is been mentioned in the press reports, etc., was that everything that the police did on that day, on Friday, was through a verbal instruction. For a country that loves to give written instructions through the fax machine, we didn't get a single piece of paper saying what actually the issue was that they had to take the action that they did. And bearing in mind, the list of actions was really long. Everything from a fire and safety inspection all of a sudden to counting the chairs in the room and so on. Everything was commanded to us verbally. It was confusing messages all the time between the federal police level and the city level, Ministry of Interior. There was just a really well-organized chaos production and provoking of everybody that was there. And not just in the room, but outside the conference area, in the subsequent march that we held on Saturday and the protest camp that has been going on for the past few days, the level of unprofessionalism and disregard for human life was also very much on display. And this is also very concerning because this was just a simple, non-violent assembly of people trying to talk and present something. So you can imagine that the level of repression is really high. There was you would typically have the state also considering emergency services, nothing. It was all riot police in full gear, heavily armed, and the numbers was really ridiculous. There was over 2,500 police mobilized for a few hundred attendees of a conference. So you can imagine the level of the atmosphere of the terrifying atmosphere that they were creating was beyond in that sense. No respect for the elderly, people in wheelchairs, children, babies that were with the nursing mothers. So it was simply the mode of operation of the police was simply to burst in whenever they could, create a terrifying atmosphere, pepper spray liberally, and detain forcefully. And this really has to serve as a warning call to the unions, to environmental activists, other movements, that the slide has already started, and that's going to hit everybody. And, at a more personal level, this is something that we hope that if there's people listening here today that belong to Extinction Rebellion, FFF, Last Generation, Just Stop Oil, all those other protest movements and activists, think about what happened here and consider why you're not at the Bundestag right now in the protest camp supporting the other people that are actually fighting the oppression that will eventually hit everybody. We have to always remember that our power is in the numbers, and where the repression is the highest is where we all need to be. Because if voices are being stifled, we must double down and raise our voices and support those that need their voices raised. And don't forget, history always shows us that we'll be victorious, and let's march towards it.
Our power. Thank you very much, Amir. Judith Meyer. And as I hand it over to you, I'd be grateful if you could outline a little bit the reaction. I mean, some people have already explained the statements from the mayor of Berlin and the interior minister, but what has the reaction been to this repression in Germany from the media, from the establishment, but also from other activists, if you're aware? What do you think we could learn from that?
Well, they really tried to shut down the Congress with every means possible, and the idea that also Yanis's speech was shut down has fortunately given rise to a bit of a Streisand effect. If you're familiar with the term, is when you try to ban something and the internet says, nope, not having that. Yes, that has been our biggest advantage because of this huge amount of attention from the newspapers who had to at least report the controversy, right? Who have been referencing or sometimes embedding Yanis' speech. This speech has been viewed by 5 million people, something that we couldn't have dreamt of if he had only spoken at the conference. And that's a good thing, of course. But in general, I must say I'm a bit more optimistic than the people who've spoken before me, because I was talking to a journalist a few days ago working on the reporting about this event, and we kind of agreed that so far it has all been like a house of lies. The German government has constructed this house of lies, like starting with the idea that attacking Gaza is self-defense on the part of Israel. And then because they lied about it being self-defense, then they had to come up with another lie to cover why Israel does not agree to a ceasefire. They're saying it's a complicated thing. Hamas would just start again or anything. And then, you know, with all the war crimes becoming clearer, they just start not showing stuff, completely giving incorrect just leaving out major parts of reality. For example, when the IDF kills children, it's never in German news. When there's starvation, it is very, very rarely. One recent case, a very obvious case, all the world's media reported about the killing of Haniyeh's family, right? I'm not as sympathetic to Haniyeh, obviously, but international law clearly forbids targeting a family of even criminals. So in Germany, there was no reporting that his family had been struck. Children 10 years old, 6 years old were killed. There was just, his sons were able to commit an assault, something, and they got killed. It's like completely, it's a mirror world, which you cannot imagine. So this house of lies just keeps going on, keeps going on. When there was the ICJ accusation against Israel, the German government had backed itself in such a corner with all these lies that they had to say, no, this is completely untrue. It is so untrue that Israel should be doing anything illegal or against international law, that we will sit down, we will be co-defendants with Israel. It's the only country that did that, not just verbally support Israel, but actually say, no, we are also on the bench, we are defendants in this trial. Then, of course, when there was news about this Congress to call out Germany's complicity in all these crimes that Israel is committing, they had to say that this Congress is all Islamists, all anti-Semites. They have no point whatsoever. Don't listen to them, because whatever they would say at the Congress is everything to debunk all these lies that have been accumulated over the past 6 months or longer. So they say it's all Islamists. They shut down the Congress. And now with the news getting out that this Congress was organized by a Jewish organization, and with Yanis Varoufakis speaking and so on, it's crashing down. So this journalist that I was talking to had the same impression that right now we're seeing this house of lies coming crashing down under the weight of everything that they had to conceal. And it is also at the same time we're seeing a crashing down of international law and freedom of speech here in Germany, or the impression that people had that there was freedom of speech here in Germany, because of everything that's happened in the past months. It's it's a waking up. It's a rude waking up for a lot of people. And so I'm in a way happy that all these lies are now coming to the fore, mainly on social media, not on the mainstream media. We still can't read anything, but on social media, it's all coming out. The Streisand effect is helping. Everyone is sharing what they see and how it doesn't match what they've been told they would see. Where I'm still a bit pessimistic and unhappy is mainly the rest of the left. Here in Germany, there hasn't been solidarity from most of the known figures of the left or from any party. No party except obviously Meta25 ourselves has spoken out about this. And that is completely different than Greece, for example, where there's a society-wide consensus that people should not be banned from entering the country or speaking at an event. And this consensus seems to be missing, or at least badly damaged in Germany. And I think we can, I hope we can restore it.
Thank you, Judith. And while we're on the subject of the media coverage, with what's currently happening between Iran and Israel, are you concerned that this might knock Gaza off the headlines somewhat? Because what I'm seeing is that that's what media are focusing on now. They've had they've tried many different angles with this story, as you've mentioned, with Gaza, and now it's all about the prospect of war breaking out and very little about what's actually happening to Palestinian people. So what would you say to that?
Yes, absolutely. That's I think that's part of the point of having this escalation with Iran is to cover up all these things that would otherwise come to the fore now. And I hope that we won't fall into that trap and that we will stay focused on Gaza.
Thank you, Judith. Hand the floor over to Johannes Fehr, who's also a candidate with Mera25 in Germany for a bid for the European elections. Johannes.
Thank you. And who was too late to the conference, to the Congress, to actually make it inside, was prevented by the police to entering, and then just saw the police storming in and being very concerned for some minutes until it was clear that, well, they arrested some people, but at least no one was seriously hurt. But of course, what happened is absolutely ridiculous. I actually also wanted to thank again Karin, Georg, everyone that organized that Congress under great pressure from the authorities over months, and actually also mention solidarity going out to the protest camp that is happening in front of the German parliament as we're speaking since weeks now. They need support. So if you that are watching this are in Berlin, they can need all the support that they can get. Go there, bring them food, tents, whatever they need to get, because they also have been attacked on the weekend by the police and can use the support that Amir was already mentioning. One update that I wanted to share with everyone is also that yesterday there was, after the weekend, the first press conference where journalists could ask the German government about what had happened on the weekend and on Friday. And the basic report from that is they just told the government line and then refused to answer any questions. And I think that is still where the government is now. It was becoming very clear when the government representative spokesperson had said that there was an Islamist and anti-Semitic Congress going on and so on, what you already heard, these lies. And when she was asked that a Jewish organization was co-organizing this event, that if there are now any Jewish Islamists in Germany, is that really the case? The spokesperson basically said no further comment. And that's where basically this government has completely embarrassed itself. But we need to keep the pressure up so that they have to actually come come clear on that. Some said that this whole things as they were happening were very surprising, and I think we haven't seen them as such before the last 6 months, as Georg has mentioned. But I think I was actually personally reminded to a different protest that I went with DM25 comrades back then in Hamburg when the G20 was taking place, by when our now current leader of this government, as a mayor in Hamburg, organized the meeting of the most powerful leaders of capitalist nations of the world. And we were there to protest, and DM25 was holding an event where Julian Assange was appeared in a live stream, and the fire alarm went off, and that event didn't happen, and the complete state of Hamburg was a police state over those days and weeks, and many got arrested, many protesters were beaten by the police. And I think that just shows us that the state here in Germany, and probably that's true for other European states as well, whenever they want to, and then they can go to authoritarianism whenever now. And I think, to go a bit into detail about why the German government is doing that, my analysis would be that it's about the complicity. They had to appear in front of the International Court, and in their defense against the complicity in Gaza, complicity for the genocide in Gaza, they actually had to list their weapon exports to Israel, to the Israeli army, and they had a slide where it was saying how many millions of weapons they delivered. And only in October last year, it was over 200 million worth of weapons. And that's what is complicity. So they had to reveal that because they couldn't hide it there. And of course, the coverage was very poor on it. And of course, they are going to try to prevent everyone from speaking about this. And it's our task, as we are doing it now, to speak about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Johannes. A couple of comments from the chat. Vague username says, what happened over the weekend is a worrisome attack on our freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. If you agree with the views of the participants or not, the level of repression is highly concerning. Violin makes a recommendation. They say that Noura Erakat's insight into the Nakba as essentially excluded from the 1948 Genocide Convention is a critical idea to spread. Lotta Pettersson from Sweden notes that I haven't seen anything in Swedish media about what happened in Berlin last Friday. Am I surprised? Sad to say, no. And Septi says they can ban Yanis, but citizens of the world cannot all be banned. Danae Stratou, based in Greece. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mehran. Actually, Johannes has covered quite a lot point I wanted to make, but I think it's still important because it's a little bit different, and Yanis also mentioned it before, but I think it's very important to realize that for a few weeks now, Yanis is a publisher in Germany of his book that had also published the previous books, and there has been a long history there, had been warning him not to participate in the conference. And obviously there was a warning there to the publishers, right? Because how would they know that there would be this fuss? So here we listen to the description of all the comrades that were present in Berlin, and the police, the way that there was so much police, all these things. If you put everything together about what happened before the conference, about trying to stop him from participating, the way that they were there at the conference, so aggressive and in so many numbers, the way that they are distorting the news coming out, where the lies about the content of the speeches and the whole thing have been completely been distorted. All this is extremely problematic, as all the speakers before me also mentioned. But it's important to bring this out and to expose, as everyone said before, this reality of what's happening in Germany, so, and elsewhere. So just these small points to give a bit more the perspective and emphasize on these. I thought it's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Danae. Julijana, also based in Germany, the speaker of our Mera 25 party in Germany. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mehran. Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really not surprised. And I have to say that I think every leftist person that ever was on a protest against fascists on the street knows that it's always the left people who have took the beating, and the fascists on the street got protected by the police. That's one picture that stands from my youth in my mind. So I'm really not surprised when I see these pictures, unfortunately. The other thing I wanted to say is that although, yeah, of course you can say, not if we say Germany, not every German, but I wouldn't let German society so easily off the hook when it comes to this topic, because I think a lot of people are making it very easy for themselves, and they have instrumentalized German history as some sort of single explanation on why Israel can do whatever they want. And I think besides confronting the German government, the other thing that is still yet to do here in Germany is really to talk to people and to explain to them, if they are not yet at the point to open their eyes to the truth of what's happening there, is to really try to explain to those parts of society that they are literally on the wrong side of history here. And it has nothing to do with German history or being protective of Jews. It's just simply wrong what's happening in Gaza today. And it hurts me to have conversations based on, but Israel, but. Those buts really need to go. And it's also on the German people who are staying quiet that this police brutality can be done, and that the government can act as they act. So yes, they are kind of also backed by a good proportion of society that is complicit to this, I have to say.
Thank you, Julijana. Well said. And we're nearing the top of the hour, so let's close and loop back to Yanis. Yanis, where can we go from here?
European Parliament elections, first week of June. But before I get there, let me say that we at DiEM25 and Mera 25, we are not demagogues. We do not try to ride a wave of popularity, of populism, or anything like that. And let me try to prove this by making a point that jars with a lot of what constitutes our ideology and philosophy. So, you have heard that over the last 2 days, there was a conference in Belgium of the ultra-right, of the parliamentary ultra-right. Nigel Farage, Suella Braverman, that awful person from former Minister of Home Affairs of the Interior in the UK, Zemmour, the ultra-rightist who stood for president of France last time around, and Orban and various others. And it turns out, from what I read, that the authorities in Belgium did something similar to what they did to us. They sent the police in there to interrupt the proceedings of that conference. Now, I came out with a statement today on unheard.com, saying that I demand my right to be pissed off by Nigel Farage's free speech. If we reach the point where the radical center bans anyone it doesn't like, either us or Farage or Orban, then there will be very little space left for democracy, for politics, or even for the idea of democracy. I loathe Farage. I loathe Orban. I loathe Zemmour. I loathe particularly Suella Braverman. But we should be ready to fight for their right to annoy us, to speak out. Many on the left don't like hearing these terms. But then again, don't forget that many on the left supported the banning of our Congress, Palestinian Congress. It is despicable that Die Linke either supported the stigmatization and the demonization of Mera 25 Deutschland, of the Jewish Voice for Peace of the Palestine Congress, or kept their mouths shut. Another dimension that Mehran and Judith looked into concerns Iran. Now, we will never fall into the trap of taking sides between the West and Iran on the basis of who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. There are no good guys here. We have to be clear on this. Iran is a brutal, authoritarian state that condemns women to third-rate, not second-rate, third-rate status, which kills women, as we saw recently, for wanting to be free and not to wear the veil. The oppression inside Iran of progressives is unbearable. At the same time, and this is the nuanced position that only our movement can take, Iran is a force of stability in a very unstable area. Let's be clear, this authoritarian, awful regime is responsible, together with the Kurds, for defeating ISIS. ISIS would not have been defeated in Syria and Iraq if it wasn't for Iran. Iraq would not have been stabilized. Many lives, hundreds of thousands of lives were saved by the intervention of Iran in Iraq. And when it comes to the clash with Israel, it is clear to me that, firstly, you have the vile attack by Israel, the bombing of the Iranian embassy in Damascus, which is a clear violation of international law. You know, the embassy of any country, anywhere, is sovereign territory. Attacking it or violating it is a violation of the international rules-based order. And what did the West do when the Israeli Air Force bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus? Silence. So when it suits them, then the international rules-based order can be junked. And then when, in a very interesting way, Iran responded the other day with those 300 missiles and mostly drones, which for me was the most diplomatic attack that has ever happened in the history of the world. Yes, it was large, because they had to make a large statement. They sent 300 aerial weapons in the direction of Israel. But have you ever heard of a power, state, organization, whatever, sending drones and advertising that they've sent the drones right at the time when they're unleashing them, before they hit the target? It was like inviting the Americans and the Israelis to shoot them down. So it was a very nuanced attempt in order to de-escalate, to show that Iran does not take lying down the bombardment of the Damascus embassy of Iran, but at the same time, it is trying to de-escalate. I'm saying all that because DiEM25 and Mehran25, we look at you out there watching us now in the eye, and we tell you our views as they are. We're not hiding anything from you. We say things that are uncomfortable. We offer a nuanced explanation of our positions and a nuanced take on the world that we live in. We support freedom, even of our opponents. We can criticize a regime like Iran very harshly, but at the same time recognize its contribution to de-escalation in the Middle East. And for all those reasons, and to answer Mehran's question, how do we proceed from here? Well, vote for Mehran25 Deutschland in Deutschland. Vote for Mehran25 in Italy and help them gather the last few signatures that are necessary to contest the Italian election, the Italian European election, and vote for Mehran25 in Greece.
Thank you, Yanis. Some last comments from the chat. Alberta Duarte says, institutional and individual silence is complicit in genocide. It's complicity in genocide, which is why one talks about Germany and not just the state. It is the banality of evil. Claudia Filippi says, fascism is back. It never died. Palestine is in our hearts. And Loki says, in response to what Yanis was just saying, long live critical thinking. And as Yanis echoed there, if you appreciate a party that believes in critical thinking, in nuanced positions on global affairs, instead of binary good and evil, then please support us. We are running in the European elections, as Yanis said, in Germany, in Italy, in Greece. And all you have to do to become a member of DiEM25 is go to diem25.org/join. And in a couple of seconds, you can be a member. Look for us on the ballot in the European elections in June and vote for us. And thank you again to our panel. Thank you again to you guys out there for your comments and questions. Come back in 2 weeks' time, same place, for another live discussion.